So we're standing in what is known as the Muster Field in Concord, Massachusetts, about 400 yards north and west of the Northbridge battle site. So just over that way, you can probably just make out the 1836 battle monument. It was here that 400 or so Minutemen and militiamen from the towns of Acton, Concord, Lincoln, and Bedford, and perhaps some smaller groups of men from Littleton and Westford, gathered before marching down to the North Bridge to confront 96 British soldiers who were attempting to hold it. Now, it looks a lot different today than it did in 1775. First of all, you can see over here we have the Buttrick Mansion, which is today the Northbridge Visitor Center. And you can also see a modern road. That's Liberty Street, and that wasn't put in until 1793, so 18 years after the battle. The other big difference, of course, is that it's much more wooded now than it was in 1775. This was all open farmland. So if I pan over this way, you can see what a large field this actually is, but it looks smaller because of all of those trees. So since we're imagining the scene, I would like to imagine that we're standing here probably on the left flank of the Colonial Line, which extends off that way. There are over 400 of these soldiers that are gathered here. And down at the bridge, there are 96 British soldiers guarding the bridge. Perhaps there's a party of officers standing off to the side. Colonel James Barrett of Concord, Lieutenant Colonel Robinson of the town of Westford, Major John Buttrick of Concord, Captain David Brown, who actually owned this field. It was his cow pasture. And maybe Captain Isaac Davis, who commanded the Minuteman Company from Acton that had just lately arrived on the field. And the men are standing loosely in their ranks. But then perhaps the officers could hear, a murmur coming from the ranks or grumbling as the men can look that way towards Concord and plainly see smoke rising above the town. What was happening is that the British soldiers found gun carriages and some other equipment and set fire to it, which is what gave off the smoke. And the men, of course, assumed that the British were burning the town. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that the British soldiers were actually putting the fire out because it had spread to one of the town buildings, the townhouse. But they had no way of knowing. Now, according to Hosmer family tradition, Lieutenant Joseph Hosmer of Concord interrupted that party of officers and, pointing to the town of Concord, said, "Gentlemen, will you let them burn the town down?" So that was it. The decision was made. So now, turning back to the ranks of men here, now the officers take their posts at the head of the companies that are now called to attention. Captain Isaac Davis comes back to his company, which is at the right side of the line, draws his sword and says, "I haven't a man that's afraid to go." And Colonel James Barrett of Concord issued the orders to march upon the bridge, but not to fire unless first fired upon. And so they wheeled off by companies from the right and headed down the old Groton Road towards the North Bridge against the British soldiers. And in the exchange of fire, 3 British soldiers are killed. There are 9 wounded, but also Captain Isaac Davis lost his life there, as did Abner Hosmer, another private in his company. And there were 4 other colonists wounded. So certainly not a large battle, but a very significant battle. The first time the colonists were ordered to fire on the king's soldiers. An act of treason and rebellion that we today remember as the shot heard round the world. That decision was made right here at about 9:30 in the morning on April 19th of 1775.